So in the video I made yesterday, I said I was going to make a subsequent video concerning the topics of what is offensive, offense, being offended, the spiritual state that is attached to adopting that state of being. And so that's what this video is going to be about. And I'm just going to talk about it in as the ideas come to me, and we'll see what happens. Probably won't be that long, but it'll nonetheless be, I think, worthy of viewing. So I want to start out by saying that as a civilization, our society gets weaker mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, on all levels. What goes along with that, and what you can see permeating deep within the overarching fabric, that weakened state in all of these aspects of our being is a people that is extremely subverted, very easy to manipulate and control and direct to whatever ends you desire to have manifest. And one of the ways that you do this very effectively is to prey upon the emotions, the lower emotions, the overly emotional state, and the overindulgence of emotion that people align themselves with and express, and allow to dictate and subdue their higher selves and dictate their realities. And so people are constantly looking for something without, as I said in my previous video yesterday, to absolve themselves of the responsibility of reconciling themselves and what their state of being, their consciousness level, all of these things that are within, that should be the primary focus and are profound, and there's enough material there to last people lifetimes, where there's no need to try and focus on the external. But it is a distraction from the tremendous work and the tremendous alone time that is necessary to reconcile the self and to ascend in these things. Requires a concerted effort, is very time consuming, can be lonely, is just very uncomfortable for a lot of people. So we look to issues and things without of ourselves, and people and things to attach, and ideologies to attach ourselves to, and people and ideas to persecute, and things that will allow us to virtue signal and all this sort of thing. So as I said, we can absolve ourselves of the responsibility of having to develop the self and ascend and manifest the ultimate self that we are all capable of achieving. But so one of the ways that is very a very potent way of achieving ends and things is directing the people's perception, preying on emotions, creating issues, and creating topics and issues that they can align themselves with, that you attach false virtue to, so that they could convince themselves that they are virtuous, and no attention need be placed on their interior self, because they are already aligned with things on the exterior that are virtuous. So I wanted to say that. But so yeah, we're looking for things externally to distract us from that which we should be directing our energy and our focus and our cognitive faculties and our just our every ounce of ourselves to. And one of these things that we can do is nitpick at things to be offended at. So it gives us further distraction. It allows us to attach ourselves to causes and things that we can champion for or against, and it allows us to virtue signal. It allows us to create this it allows us to indulge or feed the desire that we have for self-satisfaction and satisfying the desires of the ego, and create a false sense or some semblance of importance that we are, because what we're the aspects of our society that we are offended at and we're trying to tear down, we deem them to be very important. So when we do these things, when we engage with them, we feel that sense of importance that when we indulge the ego to a large degree, then we're starved for that. The more you indulge the ego, the more hungry it gets, the more it needs to be fed, the more lustful it gets. When you indulge lust, does it get satiated? No, it just gets stronger. So these sorts of things. So we can be offended, we can claim offense to this, that, and the other, and really what it is a mark of low, subdued consciousness, very mentally weak, very spiritually weak, very physically weak, and it's a juvenile mentality, because you are in control of your reaction to something. The stimulus is completely separate from you, completely apart from you, and you decide whether or not you want to be offended by it. You're choosing to be offended. You're choosing to let these things get under your skin and elicit reactions from you. And it's not because you're virtuous. It's not because you in the deepest sense actually care about these things. It's because of the reasons that I described before. The virtue signaling, the absolution of responsibility you have to develop yourself. So focusing on the external to distract. And there are many other things that we should be focusing on, as I said, not least of which is the development of the self. So we attach ourselves to these ludicrous issues and things that are offensive, like I mentioned yesterday, renaming a mountain in Yellowstone or whatever, or renaming a baseball team or whatever that has a image of a Native American, and it's called the football team, the Redskins or the Cleveland Indians or whatever. A mascot that is a cartoon, literally a cartoon, something that is meant to be whimsical and sort of lighthearted and just not at all take it seriously, is offending people. So people align themselves with this because of the false virtue that's associated with it, that they're going to be able to advertise being in possession of virtue. But you're getting offended at a drawing of something and a name, a redskin, which is a color. Red is a color, If I perceive the skin of somebody to be red and I describe it with that adjective, that's offensive. That makes me a bigot, because I'm describing something that I perceive with my sense of sight. So that's just an example. It's just completely illogical. It's just completely stupid. It's just a place filler to, like I said, be angry at something, direct your attention anywhere else but where it should be directed, and that is at yourself and an inward introspection and how you can improve as a person and all of these sorts of things. So and I'm not saying that there aren't people that use the physical attributes of others to attack those people, to create a narrative of hate, and to shun them, to subdue them, to deny them opportunities, to all these sorts of things. I'm not saying that, but we really have to ask ourselves, what is really important here? Is it a drawing of a Native American, an Indian, whatever you want to call it? A word that means absolutely nothing, an image that means absolutely nothing but that meaning which you ascribe to it. So you have to understand that you are the perceiver. It is up to you to decide whether you want to be offended. Being offended is not an elevated state. It's not something that you should align yourself with as a general rule, if a general rule can be constructed for such a thing. And really, yeah, you have to ask yourself, what is really important here? These things, all is perception. So these things that you are offended by are a reflection of the level of consciousness you are at, the level of intelligence you are at, the level of spiritual, the level of your spiritual state, and all these things. So just keep that in mind. The only meaning to these things is that which you ascribe to it. If you're choosing to assign to it a meaning that is negative or aligned with bigotry and all of these things, that's on you. When you're choosing to be offended, you're choosing to have that reaction, and you really have to ask yourself why you are doing this. What are you trying to distract yourself from? What responsibilities are you trying to shun, to sweep under the rug as it relates to your own consciousness development and all of these things? And there's many, many ridiculous examples in our society of this sort of thing, and it's become sort of the status quo, and it's become the popular opinion and the popular narrative that the masses align themselves with and use to denote their status, and peacocking, this sort of thing, trying to advertise their status and all these sorts of things. So when you remove the layers of false virtue and virtue signaling and all these sorts of things, what you find is that those of us who engage in this sort of thing, at the very core of it, is a very subdued person in terms of consciousness, spirituality, self-development, self-actualization, all these things. There's a deficit there. There's a tremendous deficit there, and that's what you'll find. A person aligning themselves with these sort of things to fill that void, to absolve themselves of responsibility. By and large, this is the case, and we need to rise above this. We need to stop assimilating ourselves into these prepackaged, curated ideas and narratives that are that make up the status quo and that are venerated and deified in our society. Start to think for ourselves and develop our own stances and rise above, get mentally strong, get physically stronger, spiritually stronger, because as it stands right now, we're basically like children walking around. We can be manipulated to do anything, to think anything, to align ourselves with any ideology, to lend ourselves to be the means to any end. And it's not a good look, and there are ramifications and consequences for being weak in these areas, and we need to strengthen ourselves in all those areas, especially mentally and spiritually, because it's clear to see the fruits of the state of tremendous weakness that we are at right now in all levels. And what this leads to is division. What this leads to is a population that is easy to divide and conquer, and that's what goes on now. All of this division, all of this divisiveness meant to serve one purpose, and that's to weaken, so that the invaders can come in and conquer and subvert. So focus on yourself, focus on your sphere of control, and develop yourself. Don't align yourself with issues and things that appear to be virtuous but are just meant to distract, divide, conquer, all of these things. And what I wanted to also say, and what goes along with this, is that it seems pretty evident that we as humans are conformists. We like to go with the herd. We have that gang mentality, that herd mentality. We like to adopt prepackaged ideologies and ways of being and all these sorts of things. And we're very impressionable. So a lot of this, when we adopt the spirit of being offended and this sort of thing, it's because that's what we've seen around us. We mimic the behaviors and the dispositions and the things that we perceive all around us. So whatever the masses are doing, we want to align ourselves with that same vibrational state, that same way of being, in order to belong to popular opinion, in order to not stand out. But we have to be willing to stand alone. We have to be willing to be that one blade of grass that's sticking up amidst the sea of conformity all around us. And we have to be willing to go against the grain. And so you might be the only person, so what? You have to be okay with that. You have to be willing to stand alone. And this has a lot to do with the deep saturation of offended and offense and all of this sort of thing that is permeating deep in our society. So we are creatures of habit. We are highly impressionable. When we observe these behaviors and these attitudes and things in others, we take it on, we incorporate it into our essence. It permeates our subconscious and then dictates our reality. In addition to this, when you are presented with certain stimuli and certain things designed to elicit a reaction from you, or to prey upon your emotions and to appeal directly to that lower aspect of your consciousness and of yourself that is oversaturated with emotion, the thing to do is to be offended. Otherwise, you're a bad person, you're attacked, you're persecuted, you're crucified. If you're not offended by this, by whatever it may be, your character is called into question, your trustworthiness is called into question, your intelligence is called into question, and you're deemed a person that is in deficit of all of these attributes, when actually it's the other way around. So you adopt these prepackaged ideologies and these prepackaged reactions and these prepackaged meanings that are ascribed to certain things, without taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, what does this actually mean to me? Is this something that I think is worthy of a reaction? Is the largely agreed upon narrative surrounding this, whatever it may be, is this something that I believe in? Is this something that makes sense to me? Is this something that resonates with me? And this sort of thing. So we adopt these prepackaged things without doing that, taking those steps to dive into the rationale behind it, to use logic, to use our cognitive faculties and the gift of reason and all these sorts of things. So we have to be more cognizant of this. We have to approach these things with this sort of neutrality and dive deep in them and decide whether or not they're worthy, whether or not the meaning that has been ascribed to them is actually a solid and logical meaning, and if it's something that we want to adopt and react to in the conventional way. So this is a very there's a lot of nuance to this topic. There's a lot of variables. There's a lot of psychology to be unpackaged and all of this sort of thing, but just keep that in mind. Exercise your agency and autonomy that you've been gifted and blessed to have, and that we all need to work at in order to strengthen, like any other muscle. And use this when presented with these things, and do not just swallow prepackaged ideas and attitudes regarding things. Don't worry about going against the grain and being that lone blade of grass that's taller than the others in that sea of conformity all around. And know that you don't have to feel the way that everybody else feels, and know the tactics that others are going to use to discredit and diminish you if you don't feel that way, or if you're not offended, or all of these sorts of things. Check out my other videos on this channel. I'm trying to do a video a day, so I have been successful at doing that. So it's an exercise in my own development of discipline, but it's also a way to explore my own thoughts and hopefully have a positive effect on those who are watching these videos and may need to hear these messages. So if you could like, share, subscribe, all that, leave your comments, leave your feedback, anything you might want advice on, or any of these sorts of things, I'd be happy to assist with that. Check out my other channel, Ray Rivera. I do music and other sorts of art and stuff on there. And bear your suffering, bear your cross with grace, with humility, with gratitude, extract nothing but the highest of vibration from it, and that is its ultimate blessing and lesson. That is to facilitate your ultimate purpose that God has created for you, and the ultimate person you are to become and to ascend to, and most importantly, the impact you are to have on others. So keep that in mind as well, and I'm done here.